Some people say the Great Wall never really stopped the nomads. That is half true. The Mongols broke through it. The Manchus broke through it. Sometimes the gates were opened from the inside, by the very people who were supposed to guard them. So why did Chinese dynasties spend 2,000 years building it again and again? And what does any of this have to do with AI? Why should you need a wall? Most people think the Great Wall was built by Qin Shuang, the first emperor. Not quite. Back in the Warring States period, centuries before unification, individual kingdoms were already building walls. There were no national borders in the modern sense. Each state built walls along natural terrain. The three northern kingdoms built walls specifically to defend against nomadic tribes from the steppe. After the first emperor unified China, he tore down the walls between the kingdoms, but kept the ones facing north. Then he connected them into one continuous line. That became the Great Wall. When the wall first appeared, its most important purpose, besides defense, was to stop people from leaving. Before the Warring States period, population control was relatively loose. If a farmer in the state of Lu thought life was bad, he could sneak across the border to the state of Qi and try his luck there. But during the Warring States era, kingdoms were fighting constantly. Battles involved hundreds of thousands of troops. At the Battle of Chengping, the combined armies of Qin and Zhao totaled close to 1 million. To this day, you can still find bones at that battlefield. So population became a country's most critical resource. No people, no soldiers, and your kingdom gets swallowed by the next one. If you were the king, what would you do? This is where we need to talk about how warring states' kingdoms actually controlled their populations. Take the state of Qin. Its chancellor, Xiangyang, created a household registration system. This system, in various evolved forms, still affects over 1 billion Chinese people today. The rules said farmers could not leave their land. Every person was issued a wooden ID card with their name, hometown, and physical description. If you traveled, you had to carry it, plus an official letter from your local authority explaining why you were traveling. No ID, arrested on the spot. Now you might be thinking, fine, I'll just stay home and keep out of trouble. No, that didn't work either. Every 10 households were grouped together. These 10 families were bound in life and death. If anyone in your group ran away, or if you sheltered someone with no ID, all 10 families would be executed or exiled together. In 338 BC, the man who created this very system, Xiangyang himself, was falsely accused of treason. He fled in the middle of the night. When he reached an inn at the Qin border and asked for a room, the innkeeper refused him in a panic. Xiangyang wasn't carrying his ID. Taking him in meant a death sentence for the innkeeper. Xiangyang had nowhere to hide. Border soldiers captured him. He was dragged back to the capital and executed by being torn apart by 5 horses. There is a Chinese idiom that comes from this story. It roughly means, killed by your own law. Beyond preventing people from leaving, the wall also controlled strategic resources and collected taxes. Merchants had to pay a 10% tax every time they passed through a gate. If they were transporting horses, cattle, dogs, salt, or iron, they needed not just heavy taxes but central government approval. Yes, you heard that right. Large dogs were classified as strategic military assets. They could serve as guard dogs and even fight in battle. And in ancient China, dog meat was one of the 6 major sources of protein. Sorry, got a bit sidetracked there. By the late Warring States period, the kingdoms launched tariff wars against each other, but the opposite of Trump's tariff war. Instead of raising tariffs to keep things out, these ancient states slashed tariffs to 0, trying to attract merchants to bring resources in. After the first emperor unified China, every dynasty that followed kept building the wall. When the empire was strong, they pushed it a bit further north. When the empire was weak, it crept a bit further south. Eventually, the wall settled on the line where it stands today. It was the scar left behind when the farming civilization pushed as far as it could go. Any further north, and you simply couldn't grow crops. Both the household registration system and the wall were tailor-made for a farming civilization. The empire could send armies into the grasslands, but it couldn't govern nomads with a system designed for settled farmers. This system turned China into the most powerful agrarian empire in history. It also imprisoned her. Back to the question we started with. Could the wall actually stop the nomads? Picture the northern border without a wall. Harvest just ended. Villages are full of grain. A band of steppe cavalry shows up. They ride in, grab the food and the people, and vanish before reinforcements arrive. A successful raid might take just a few hours. The wall flipped that math. With the wall in place, small raiding parties couldn't break through at all. Steppe tribes had to unite into proper armies just to try. Even if they breached a weak section, they had to think about how to get back out. Once the beacon towers were lit, nearby garrisons would move toward the likely retreat routes. The raiders came in fast and light, but they had to leave heavy, loaded down with grain, livestock, and captives. The cheapest route out was the way they came in, so they had to leave men behind to hold it. That split their forces and killed their mobility. Nearby garrisons would close in, and the raiders went from being hunters to being hunted. On top of that, armies made up of different tribes often fell apart, fighting over how to split the loot, so the wall worked. It massively raised the cost of raiding, and it wasn't just the Chinese who built walls. Even settled-down nomadic and forest-dwelling peoples built them. The Khitan, originally nomadic, founded the Liao dynasty. After they settled down, the border wall they built was longer than any wall built by any Chinese dynasty. The Jurchen, a forest-dwelling people who replaced the Liao and founded the Jin dynasty, extended their earthen wall to 5,000 kilometers. The wall didn't just raise the cost of raiding, it became a tool for the Central Empire to control the steppe. Before the wall existed, there was a long gray zone between the farmland and the grassland. It had border markets, intermarried villages, tributary tribes, and plenty of people who couldn't really say which side they belonged to. They might be herding sheep with a nomadic clan one day and selling horses at a Chinese market the next. That ambiguity itself was a kind of buffer. Small conflicts could be absorbed in the gray zone without blowing up into wars between states. The wall cut that gray zone right down the middle. People inside the wall increasingly looked like imperial subjects. People outside increasingly looked like external threats. The space where people could trade, migrate, and live mixed lives got carved into two opposing worlds by the border defense system. Then there was trade. The steppe needed grain, salt, iron pots, cloth, and tea from the Central Plains. The Central Plains needed war horses and furs from the steppe. The gates in the wall were the valve. Obedient tribes got the markets opened. Disobedient tribes got blockaded. The gates were an extension of the emperor's power. So how did the wall actually work day to day? Soldiers would spread fine sand on both sides. Footprints on the outside meant enemies were coming. Footprints on the inside meant someone was smuggling or trying to escape. Beacon towers transmitted information at the speed of light. A steppe army could arrive at a gate, and the emperor, sitting in a capital hundreds of miles away, would know about it the same day. But most of what the wall dealt with every day was not war. Excavations at Han Dynasty border posts have turned up huge numbers of wooden slips. They're full of the most mundane things. Soldier rations, patrol reports, sick leave requests, registers of escaped people, cargo manifests for merchant caravans. Where are you from? What tribe? What are you carrying? Are you a merchant, a refugee, a spy, or someone coming to surrender? Get registered. Then you can enter. The wall's most routine daily job was turning people who moved into people who could be filed. Now, we've seen plenty of benefits, but everything has two sides, and the problems the wall left behind were even bigger. First, it restricted people's movement. The Central Plains had floods almost every year. People couldn't move north to find better land. The steppe had blizzards. When the Central Empire was strong, none of this was a crisis. The court would open its granaries and hand out food, not just to its own people, but to the steppe tribes too. But when the empire was weak, whether from economic decline or corruption, natural disasters turned into death sentences. Starving nomadic tribes would unite into massive armies and push south. Starving farmers would revolt. Almost every single dynasty in Chinese history fell because of this. The wall shaped the empire. It shaped the Chinese character, and it shaped increasingly powerful enemies. The Jin dynasty kept the Mongol tribes under extreme pressure. Every few years they sent armies north to kill young men and thin the population. They called it culling. In the short term, it worked. The enemy got weaker, But the pressure also made scattered, disorganized steppe tribes slowly realized they were all facing the same enemy. Hatred is sometimes the best fuel for unity. When Temujin rose to power, he wasn't just rallying his own tribe. He was rallying generations of pent-up rage from across the entire steppe. Tribes cut off from survival don't quietly starve. Those who can't raid submit to someone stronger. Those who can't survive scattered accept unification. The result swept across most of Eurasia. The wall protected the world inside it, and on the other side, it slowly forged the very enemy it feared most. It split the East Asian continent in two. South of the wall, everyone farmed. North of the wall, everyone herded. No buffer zone. The wall became a hard border. It turned what could have been a slow, gradual blending into a violent collision every few hundred years. Gradual blending comes with growing pains. Violent collision comes with tens of millions dead each time. Looking at it now, that fusion was inevitable. The wall was like a dam. When it held, everything looked fine. When it broke, the flood was catastrophic. The wall could stop raids and extortion. But if the nomads truly set their minds on replacing the empire, the wall could do very little. What would it have looked like without the wall? Chinese dynasties actually tried going without one. Every alternative came with its own price. The Tang dynasty at its peak barely built any wall. It chose to fight cavalry with cavalry. It used military protectorates and a loose governance system to pull steppe powers directly into the imperial order. It went on the offensive against the Turks. It turned steppe nobles into half-allies through marriages and titles. But without a static wall, you need a living wall. War horses, military towns, generals, and an endless stream of money. The problem is, the moment the center weakens, the generals holding all those troops become the biggest threat themselves. In 755, and Lushan launched a rebellion from the northeast that punched all the way to the capital. The An Lushan rebellion killed an estimated 30 million people, roughly 1/8 of the entire world's population at the time. The Song dynasty faced a different situation. The 16 prefectures, that stretch of mountain passes around modern-day Beijing and northern Shanxi, had been handed to the Khitan by a warlord named Shizun Town during the Five Dynasties period. The Song never got them back. Without that mountain barrier, the Song was staring straight at the wide-open North China plain. Building a wall across that plain would have cost a fortune, so they improvised. Crossbows, fortress networks, annual tribute payments to buy peace. They even built an artificial network of rivers and wetlands across Hebei as a water defense line. But water is only a wall in summer. In winter, it freezes and becomes a highway. Soldiers had to spend every winter breaking ice nonstop. The Qing dynasty might be the peak of Chinese imperial statecraft. It absorbed every lesson from every dynasty that came before. They were the ones who got let in through the wall by a general named Wu Songwei, so they knew the wall's weaknesses better than anyone. As close relatives of the Mongols, they saw the steppe in a completely different way from Chinese dynasties. The Qing used the banner system to fold Mongol tribes into the 8 banners military structure. They used Manchu-Mongol marriages to tie steppe nobility into the royal family. They used Tibetan Buddhism to spiritually stitch the entire northern frontier together. In other words, the Qing didn't build a taller wall. They took what would have been a wall and rebuilt it as marriage, religion, and shared interest. That is why the Qing controlled the largest territory in Chinese history. But all of these were exceptions, and every exception came with its own price. The longer pattern is this. Every time an experiment in openness went wrong, the logic of the wall pulled the state back in the same direction. Hold the land, fix the population, control the border, minimize risk. Over 2,000 years, this stopped being a policy choice. It became an instinct. So the wall was the most effective tool the ancient Chinese ruling class had for maintaining power. It was expensive, the side effects were enormous, and nobody was happy about it except the emperor himself. So what does this have to do with AI? AI is developing fast. It won't be long before it brings a robotics revolution. Not just white-collar jobs. All factories, all agriculture, everything will be run by machines. When that happens, even without a war, the demand for resources will change beyond recognition. Anything you can use to build robots and power them, nations will fight over these like never before. The value of human labor will shrink. Robots will be like the farmers of the warring states. No creativity needed. Just work the fields and fight the wars. The more you have, the stronger your country. Follow that logic, and if humans still behave the way they did 2,000 years ago, fighting to grab resources, fighting to protect resources, then walls between nations, in all kinds of forms, are inevitable. In the short term, these walls will protect you, shape you, but they will also shape your enemies. Just like the Great Wall, walls only slow down fusion. They cannot stop it. And when fusion finally comes, it will be far more violent because of the walls that delayed it. And in this coming wave, the one who might actually need a wall is you. How are you going to survive the age of AI? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe would mean a lot. See you next time.